kids. I really do.
Some in Pennsylvania, 3 that we saw at Thanksgiving, and now they're sucked back to Pennsylvania. But, you know,
They're a lot of fun. They really are.
and two in Franklin, Surrey, or Blue Hill area, so that's nice.
So I believe we're live.
Okay.
Does Mark come?
I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of the, I'm here. Oh, he asked me if Mark was coming.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you the same question.
Why?
Well, you're friends.
He told us about you. I thought you could tell us about him.
I haven't seen him in a few days. Actually, a couple weeks I
I
haven't seen
remember
him.
he was saying that
So many
he had some
people
hunting
resigned.
scheduled, so he might be waiting
Thank
on
you
that.
so much.
Yeah, he usually goes
Oh, my God.
moose hunting or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And he likes, it's a whole group of them, so.
Here, I can move down this
Yeah,
way.
I've spread out because I'm a lefty, so I,
I didn't dress up. I just got out of the shower, threw something on I could find, and here I am.
You look great. You look like yourself.
I'll
Good
switch
shade.
it Up the heat a little bit.
sure.
was kinda-
Yeah,
Oh, I can do it.
Do you know how to do it?
I don't know how.
it
but
has
I'll-
instructions on it.
It's
Uh,
rough look. So,
Are fairly easy.
we got a few minutes before the meeting actually starts.
Yeah, well, that's slow.
We're live. Do you think somebody
We
would
are
be
live.
upset because they tuned in at 5:30 and missed something?
It could be, you never know. You're trying to hide something, trying to get it in before the official opening.
Do you want help, Nancy? Yeah, I think you just do that, and then you hit the done button.
It's warm.
When it makes lots of noise, you do.
Yeah, when it starts clanking.
Turn the fan on over there on the other wall, that'll suck the air out. Come, it'll cool it down.
6:30, I'm over there again.
I remember, when we had the stairs going up into the office in that corner?
That's a while
That was a
ago.
long
Yeah,
time
it
ago.
was a long time ago. I remember we'd have some meetings in here where people would be sitting on the stairs.
Was the police station still in here then? It's over there, okay.
Here, yeah.
Yeah. This used to
We
be a
had
barber shop too.
meetings here where the fire chief showed up
Yeah,
and
that's-
told us to
It used to be at Lincoln
get rid of some of these people because we were over
That was good. I
capacity.
remember the kid Toyland was downstairs.
Yeah.
You pick them.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I have that it's officially 5:30. Hopefully Mark Haskell will be showing up any minute. It does become a challenge parking here in the evenings now with a popular restaurant next door, so I know that can be an issue.
Yeah, I parked across the street, had a plow and everything, took up 2 spaces, so,
Who did that?
I don't know.
That's helpful.
Huh?
I said, that's helpful.
That was me.
Oh, you're the one with the plow that took up 2 spaces.
Yeah.
Oh, that's helpful, John.
That's okay.
I'm going to go ahead and start, and even though we might not be able to vote on the minutes, did everybody, when Steve Malcheski sent out the agenda a couple of weeks ago, did you all get the minutes from the last meeting? I have one correction. I don't know if anybody else has one. On item number 3, down below where it says Article 4, Part B, Personnel, Steve Malcheski and Nancy Cottle Johnson. I think that was an error. I think Steve was going to work on personnel all by himself. So that needs to be corrected from the minutes.
Okay.
Those minutes.
I got the minutes.
Would have gone out with the
I don't
agenda?
have,
Would have gone out with the agenda.
I may not have gotten that either. Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
For the last meeting?
You now know you successfely turned up the heat
I wasn't here, so I can't.
You know.
because of the clanking. Would anybody like to
I
see
didn't
these?
have-
I got the
I
minutes
didn't,
or the agenda.
I
And
didn't-
he sent me an email this afternoon and said, do you have any idea what the agenda is? And
I didn't-
so
I
told
didn't
him,
get either.
Oh, Steve sent them to,
Yeah, I think.
okay.
I don't, huh?
I remember.
I
You
didn't
got
get
the
them.
agenda for today's meeting?
Okay,
I didn't even see that either.
you may, but we can postpone approving the minutes till the next meeting. The agenda is,
Why was I on here?
well, that's what I'm deleting, as you notice. I think my notes were just incorrect, Nancy. So that's why I'm saying that's the correction that
Oh, I see
I
what
have
you're
to the
saying.
minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
So our agenda was going to be approval of the minutes, any public comment, and then Roger Moody is coming at 6 to to give us his input on the town charter. And then we need to discuss our vacancies, and what to do about that. Unfortunately, since Mark isn't here at the moment, we can't do a new thing on the agenda, which would have been electing a new chair and vice chair. So we'll have to do that at some point before the meeting ends.
Thanks for coming back.
And then we were going to discuss where we were on certain articles. We were going to review the language again about the filling of the vacancies on the select board, which we talked about in the last meeting, and say whether we liked it or not. We were then going to discuss recall concept, and then Part B of the Personnel Administration section in Article 4, and then any progress reports if we got that far. Just progress reports on where we are on other articles. So,
And you don't want to elect a chair in case she's coming to be part of the,
pardon?
well, why is it you want to wait till he gets here?
We need 6 people to vote. We need a quorum of 9 members, and Mark makes 6. So I don't think we can,
6 or 5?
well, 9. 4.5 would be half.
So 5 would be.
5 would be actually the quorum, wouldn't it?
Saved.
You know, we're really.
Saved by the mathematician.
We're really in flux here,
Yes.
in virtually everything we're doing, we're in
Yeah.
flux. Something that if we can't do it in today's agenda, I would like to see on the next time's agenda, is to talk in general about how we're going to handle changes. I mean, one of the things that Deb and I talked about is that if we're really rewriting the charter, which seems to be the way we're going, then we should be able to eliminate all this stuff that's currently in the charter that says this was amended in 1992, because it really doesn't matter anymore. You know, who cares what happened back then, other than for the history? If we're going to have a nice, clean new charter, then we shouldn't have to have all those, I would think. But we, as a group, we ought to talk about that and agree that that's the way we're going.
I thought we kind of agreed to that, but I'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting to define if we're going to eliminate references to historical information. I mean, because there are some sections that talk about as if the charter is just being written, approved for the very first time, and that's not the case. It was revised in 1987, so we don't need that kind of language.
There was that one paragraph about how, I don't know, 1990 or something, that the fiscal year was changed, about how you had this transition.
Yeah, that's
The
OBE.
fiscal year starts here, ends there, next topic. You know, it doesn't matter what changes we made 30 years ago that no longer impact us, I think.
Because there's somewhere that someone can go for charter commission and get all of the
The charter
history they
exists.
want, right?
It exists. Yeah, we're not erasing the current charter, which has all
Every
these kind of
version
references.
is going to still be there.
Yeah.
Okey-doke. Since you're saying that you believe 5 is a quorum, do we want to talk about chair and vice chair at this point and get that taken care of? Or do you want to wait till another meeting? And since I was vice chair, I'll continue to be acting as,
Did you want to be chair?
I'll be chairing the meetings as vice chair.
I think that we should do it myself now.
So are you ready for
I
nomination?
am happy to
You're
take-
doing all
take-
the work
take-
for us.
Take on the chairwoman's role.
We
I'm
could
be
probably
pleased to
vote
do that.
Make her a chair.
We would need a vice chair. And I could,
So I'll nominate Deb to be chair of the commission.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's good.
Yeah, well,
Everyone in favor?
all those in
Aye.
favor, say aye.
thank you very much, Deb.
Thanks, Deb, for stepping up and all that you do.
You've already been stepping up from the beginning.
And she has.
Well, thank you. I'm
we go.
happy to do it. Do we want, I mean, Mark's not here, that's,
I think we should,
When did you
Let's
talk to him
go.
last?
last meeting was the last time I talked to him.
Let's see, you probably won't even text him, tell him, where are you?
Yeah, if he's out roasting a moose or something.
He's probably up there.
Okay,
so
This one's over, isn't it?
so number one,
I nominate, Larry, would you like to be willing to be vice chair?
I'd be willing to give it a
Oh, that would be
swing.
so great.
Let's see what we can do here.
So Nancy's nominated you.
I'll second that nomination for Lowry for vice chair.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That's great, Lowry.
You're a good team from the old planning board days.
We have worked together,
Yeah,
Long time.
very nicely.
Long time.
So we
One
can
day
do that.
we will die.
Well, we'll
Well,
always,
thank you for that happy note. Of course, we will. I don't see any public to give us any comments at the moment. In case somebody comes in, we can always add that at the end. While we wait for Roger, I guess we could talk about vacancies. Since Steve has had to resign for personal reasons, Chris McLean has had to resign because, as you all know, he's terribly occupied with his law firm's current work. And Robin resigned because she's taken on a new job. So I checked in with Janice, and we had asked her after our last meeting to advertise and announce that we had openings, and she has not received any applications. So I think it might be a good idea if we think about how we could fill out our commission. And one thought I had was maybe to get something in the newspapers about our work, what we've done so far, and we're looking for a couple of up to 3 interested citizens to apply to be part of the Charter Commission to help us, carry it through to the end. We have done, I think, even though it doesn't appear in the minutes, we've done some significant work and significant editing and looking into what other towns do, and so I think we've made some good progress. I don't think when somebody comes on board, we need to start from scratch, but either Lowry or I both of us could spend time with them, bringing them up to speed, so we don't have to start at Article 1 again. We could handle that. But I think it might be good for us to think about who we know out there that might be interested in contributing. I know I know Karen Grove
She was very interested.
was interested in it, and even though that may tilt towards would have quite a few former select board members, but select board members are people that have really worked within the confines of the charter.
I was just going to suggest calling all the former select board members to see if they'd like to be involved this way, actually. I mean, there might be others too.
Well, there
and
are.
They know
There
the
are.
town better than other
Some of them are
people.
involved with other things.
I was actually going to think about asking Roger Moody. When I spoke to him the other day to remind him and ask him if he could come at 6, he said that he had been doing his homework. He got Janice to print him out a copy of the Charter Commission. I think Roger would be
Oh, yeah.
a terrific addition if he
really
has,
good,
if
You'd
he has
be really
interest.
fortunate.
Be nice if, I think that maybe we should try to get articles in the 2 newspapers.
Yeah.
And then have the select board make an announcement during their meeting.
Yes, that would be a good idea.
Okay, if they could do that, just to let people know. 'Cause
I will
probably-
ask them a
I
second time.
suspect More people watch that TV show than watch this TV show. So have them make that announcement that we're looking for something, because people just might not be aware. And I saw that there was an article in a couple of papers, because Rockport's starting to do their comprehensive plan rewrite, and there was just a newsy article about that in there, so maybe that would be helpful.
Joe?
So somebody just needs to write a press release about it.
Yes.
Nancy is really good at that.
You're a little slammed at the
Are
moment,
you?
aren't you?
Sorry.
I'm a little half-mast right now, something's going on.
How about you?
I can give it a go if you'll.
If you want to give it a go and then send it to me?
You polish it up.
Absolutely. If you start it, that would be great. So you do a draft, that would be wonderful.
And the statute says we have to have 9 members.
Yes, and then that we can fill the vacancies of those people that were elected, but we do want them to apply, fill out an interest
And then
form.
the select board will approve them.
No,
We
no,
can do it
if they were elected by the town, the Charter Commission itself can appoint them.
So that's good to have in the release,
Yeah.
a little education.
Yeah.
You sure about that one?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The select board, if one of the 3 of us that was
Appointed.
appointed by the select board decides not to
You and
continue.
I are appointed.
And Lowry.
On your point.
So the 3 of us.
So if one of the 3 of us says, I just can't do this, I've run out of time, then the select board appoints a replacement.
Right.
Got
But
it.
if it's somebody who was elected, they don't have to be elected again except
By us,
So if we have
elected by
4
the,
applicants, we pick the 3 that we think would be the most able to contribute.
Okay, that's good.
okay, that's terrific. One thing that's not on the agenda, but we have been asking for it for quite some time, was the select board's list. So I thought I'd hand that out now, and we can add it to the agenda. We don't need to discuss it. What I received it this afternoon from Audra. It's, a bulleted list, and I just made some teeny notes in red, annotated it, like there's one of the items we've already addressed, things that we're going to discuss anyway, just so we know that we don't need to spend lots of time on some of them. So I will pass that out. One of the interesting things at the end is that Allison found a town in Massachusetts, Amherst, that converted to a council form of government, and they also have a really nice Charter Commission report, which I took a quick look at, didn't read, that's very professional, that looks nice. So those references are listed on here. The list, for instance, is reduction of the number of the Budget Committee. We've already handled that. Looking at the current requirement for 3 select board votes required if there's only 3 in attendance, which I think is interesting, meaning could the 3 make a decision, 2 out of 3?
Changing the quorum is what you're doing from
Right.
3 to whatever's there.
Anyway, there's the whole list, and so I thought I'd just give it to you guys, and we can talk talk about it at the next meeting. Do you think you'd see Mark? Or I could email it to him, or do you want to take an extra copy?
Remark?
Yeah, for Mark? Yeah,
Sure.
well, Jim, why don't you pass that extra copy?
Here you go, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doesn't Amherst have like 50,000 people in it?
They have 32,000, over 32,000.
Well, you got a school there with at least 30 in it.
Unless-
University of Massachusetts is there.
They also have a different form of town meeting, form of government. They have 10 precincts, and they send 24 people from each precinct to the town meeting. So currently, the town meeting is 240 people. But they already have representatives from each precinct elected to go to town meeting. So it's a different
Kind of like having a
situation. Kind of like Congress. So a couple of these things, like provide more understandable language on wastewater, I've already dealt with that with Audra. The obsolete language from a statute that was repealed in 1980, that's easy to take care of. Meeting notice requirements for the select board, a recall option for the select board, quorum guidelines for annual town meetings or special town meetings. And the last one, I don't need to read it, requirement for commissions, committees to be actually outlined in the charter. I think these won't take too long for us to sort of deal with at the next meeting.
One question?
Yep.
None of the town employees are bonded?
No. The ones that deal with finances, our current charter requires that they be bonded if they deal with finances. And I think the question is, I think this implies the question, do we need a requirement that they're bonded? Because our charter already says that anybody who deals with finances needs to be bonded.
So who are the bonded employees right now?
People who deal with money.
Finance director?
I think what Audra said, though,
Town
is that under the current insurance program, they're already
Taken care of.
covered against
And-
malfeasance type things.
And we've already handled that actually in rewriting, so that's something we've already
Marlene
discussed.
and Jody are probably the 2.
Town clerk,
Yeah. maybe
Anybody
town
who-
clerk.
tax collector,
Yep.
et cetera.
But
Okay.
really, anybody that signs the checks.
And we already
Collect
discussed
money,
that with
yeah.
Audra, actually, and made the revision she suggested, and that's in
The tax
section
board pays
1
for
or
2
whatever.
different bondings. One's a bond and insurance.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, she wants to make sure we pay one time.
Right.
And get everybody covered who ought to be covered. Because even, like, Katrina should be covered.
So if you have a chance to look at this before our next meeting, it would be very helpful. If you have any questions about what these little bullet things mean, send me your question and I'll check in with Bob or Audra to get any clarification if we wonder what their bullet points mean.
Just quickly, if I may ask, you understand, why do they want to do a guideline for the annual town meeting you know, sometimes we have 35 people, sometimes we have 200 people.
They raised the question even at their meeting, I guess the previous meeting, about whether a quorum would be a good idea or not to have at town meeting.
Quorum of who?
Quorum of town voters, and then how would you establish what that quorum is?
There's 4,000 voters in the town of Camden.
And how would you decide what the quorum is, and how would you get them there? Well, I can go ahead and tell you, I found 2 towns of the 12 I've looked at that do require a quorum. Ogunquit, they only have 921 people in the town, so it's understandable why they might want a quorum, and it has to do with how many people voted in the last gubernatorial election. And then the other one is Poland, and I spoke to the town manager, and they have an open town meeting. They have 5,400 people in the town. That's the population, not necessarily the registered voters. They have a minimum of 100 required at town meeting. And I asked the town manager, well, how does that work out for you? And he said, most town meetings we have to get on our cell phone and start calling people to come down to
I was just going to
the
say,
town
that's going to be
meeting.
a tough thing to do.
So if there's 75 show up, they sit there and wait
For 25 more.
until they can call 25 more who can come there.
That's right.
Which 25 do they call? I mean, I would, if I was looking at this from an ultimate fairness standpoint, I would say, how do you decide
Who you call.
who you call? Do you call only Republicans, only Democrats, only, you know?
Well, no, I mean, to
Well,
me,
but I mean,
yeah.
but I think that whenever you do something like that, that's a reasonable question to ask.
So this is one reason why probably more and more communities move away from the meeting.
Well, one town I talked to, Kennebunk, doesn't vote on the budget in an open town meeting. They vote on it by referendum, and that's in their charter. They vote at secret ballot. Just like the school board confirmation, we vote on secret ballot. Kennebunk is a town meeting form of government, but the citizens vote, not a council votes on the budget. The citizens vote, but they vote on secret ballot, and I don't know how detailed it is on the ballot.
Marlboro did the same thing about 5 years ago, and
Did
it got
they?
to be very interesting because a piece of the town administration budget didn't pass, which included the town manager and some office.
I remember when they,
So the board decided to have a open town meeting to vote on that again, and that turned into a lawsuit on whole 9 yards. But in the end, the board was right, they could have an open meeting for that, but, I mean, I've said for years, we've probably got to go to the ballots for the budget, to get more people to involved in it.
say,
Right.
and that's what Mike Pardue, who's the town manager of Kennebunk, said, that they felt that by doing that, more people had a say. And they're very good. They have a minimum of 2 public hearings on the budget. They have a really good, a pretty thorough public process before it goes on the ballot.
But a lot of people, even the ones that come to the open meeting, they have agenda items. They're very familiar with whatever is controversial to them, or
Right.
near and dear to their heart, and they make sure that particular item goes. Other than that, the rest of it is just live the ride.
We vote on about 60% of the budget by secret ballot, because that's the school portion. Right?
True, of
By
the
60%
of the things
our
that,
expenses.
right.
We vote through secret ballot, because that's the school portion, give or take.
Well,
So-
technically, yes, you're approving the number that was approved by
Yeah.
the
With-
budget committee.
But
Meeting.
they kind of just stamp it.
Yes.
But of our municipal budget, what's that percentage? 60% is
60,
school
and then
and/or
you've got the
county?
chunk that goes, well, more.
No,
you've got
not the
like
municipal
60%.
budget, the tax bill.
The tax bill, thank you, you're right, the
Municipal
tax.
budget's only 27%.
Yeah, the tax bill,
And
thank
then by
you.
the time you take away payroll, the amount that you can really
Work
have
on.
much say on is pretty small.
What's that?
The budget where we can actually make changes is, the portion is fairly small.
Yeah, because
for the
even
overall.
though for years though, now they don't have the opportunity to discuss line by line at the budget. It's either approve
Yeah.
the number, or you go up or down, but you can't go in and go into decline. Hey, Roger.
Hey, Roger.
Thank you so much.
This is good news, 'cause I've been to special town meetings where there's like 8 people.
Or fill the room, depending on what it
In the
is.
old days when Andy Shapiro was here, I remember when he was
Roger.
So the Raptors,
in middle school, high school.
Okay.
was the last time that happened.
So that's one of our assignments for next meeting is going through their list. And if you have any questions about what they mean, let me know right away so I can follow up with Bob or Audra on what these bullet points may
The other
mean.
thing too, that you'd have to think about is when they have special town meetings in this room. A lot of times, 15 people decide an article.
That's correct.
So,
The other thing is, there's a fire code limit to this room. So if we had,
70.
if we had 150 people
64.
showed up, they wouldn't be allowed to come in and vote. So again, how do you decide who gets to come in and vote? You, sorry, can't take you, we'll take this other
But
person.
technically, if the room is full, you're supposed to find another location.
Right.
Yeah, adjourn
But
upstairs.
that's always.
Oh, yeah, and by the time you
If
disrupt
somebody
everything.
shows up
they
late
go-
and said, geez, I didn't know you moved this up to here,
Yeah.
I didn't get the vote.
Well, Roger, you're our guest of honor tonight. You know everybody around
Yes,
the
I do.
table.
Yeah, good to see everybody again.
We asked you to come to give us your insight as a former town manager and also somebody who's worked in the county commission on what you see in the charter that has worked well when you were in that role of town manager, what you see in it that you think could be streamlined or improved. If there's any issues you think would be good for us to take a look at. We've been doing this now for a couple of months, so we've been making our headway through the articles. So there may be some things you bring up that we may have already addressed, but we are here to listen to you and hear what you have to say and what suggestions you have for us things to look at.
Okay. Well, I thought maybe I've been through the charter, of course, again, and done a little homework. And maybe I could just go through the charter and do some of the routine things, housekeeping things that you probably have caught up on, but
Sure.
if we want to spend much time on it, then maybe finish up with some of the
Substantive.
limitation stuff. I mean, in general, it just needs reorganization. If you look at some of the more recent charters, or those that are online is where I found them. I mean, they read, the language flows and it's logical. I mean, the parts are all there, but, you know, the language about how it was adopted in the first place can go. And I was always worried about this, you know, posting elections, and this is at the top of page 5 of the charter. Posting in three conspicuous places 7 days prior. I suppose that meets a lot of the law, but who looks at those things? It's usually at the post office,
Right?
or in the fire
The
station.
library.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, electronic posting should be, I think.
Should be
Probably do that
added.
anyway, but this would encourage that.
Okay. I think we talked about that, didn't we? We
cited
added.
3 specific locations for the posting,
Yeah.
and then talked about also requiring a posting for some type of online publication, like the town's Facebook page or whatever, some other places where people are more likely to see it.
Also, on that page 5, paragraph E, to serve on the budget nominating committee, that process. I've always been a little concerned about that, in that it could be, the budget committee could be stacked one way or another, and the nominations they bring could change the town in some drastic way by a small number of people.
Do you want to address that, Lowry?
What we thought about was that one of the most common complaints about the whole municipal government process is the budget committee is way too big. It's unmanageable. When
Right.
you have that many people, there's a tendency for somebody to say, well, sure, somebody else looked at this, so I don't have to bother. And when we're dealing with what we figure, 15% or 17% of the actual expenditures, you really need all these people. Our thought is to eliminate the budget nominating committee and have a budget committee of 9 people that would be, of citizens, would be voted on at the town meeting by citizens, that in order to get considered for vote, you would take one of those interest forms that you take for other organizations and you
Yep.
submit it to the select board. So maybe when we have a town meeting, maybe there's 11 people that say that they would like to serve and we vote, and the 9 with the most votes are the members of the budget committee.
Self-nominating, almost.
Yeah. That would work better than what you have now. I mean, the next step beyond that would be to have them seek a petition with so many names and so on.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the town has been so fortunate to have people, I think, on the budget committee who've always been thoughtful, by and large committed to attending and such.
Yeah.
But if that spirit of good intentions ever fails for some reason, the town could be in a bit of trouble. So I think you're on the right track.
And we'd also talked about eliminating the prohibition against successive terms.
Yes.
It seems weird
Yeah.
that you can have select board members having successive terms, but not budget committee members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the language we're still kicking this stuff around is one of the towns we looked at had a provision where you could have 3 consecutive terms of 3 years each before you would have to take a year off. And then if you wanted to come back,
Right.
but that's still up for discussion, but we're drifting in that direction.
Yeah.
It would eliminate some of the problem of losing institutional memory and getting the hang of the budget approval process, because sort of your first year, I mean, I remember it's kind of like your eyes are wide open, and being able to, have more than one term, the committee can benefit from your knowledge.
Yeah.
And not everybody, half the people, I mean, we had to replace 10, 11 people last year, so this go around this coming March, there are all be people who've never done this before, and time will have to be taken to be educating them, and so, I mean, that's what, some of this would help streamline.
Well, if you look, a lot of the people that served on the budget committee have served on some form of the government with the town over the years,
Yeah,
continued that interest in the community.
Yep.
But I have noticed, though, other than the vacancy the last time, the group seems to be much more engaged than it has been for years. I mean, the last 4 or 5 years, a lot more good questions, very good questions being asked. And for a long time, it was just
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe we'll have competition if this gets approved for those 9 spots.
Yeah.
How about, like with the Charter Commission, what happened is there were more people who were nominated or put on with some of the people as seconds to step in case people
Alternates.
stepped off. Yeah, alternates
That's an
for-
idea.
They could be held in
for
reserve.
Charter Commission and alternates for the Budget Committee, because inevitably people leave.
Yes?
I think that
And that could even be decided by lot. If there were a lot of people who wanted to be on,
Yeah.
I mean, you could basically draw, and qualified, you could draw straws to see who were the first and who were going to be the alternates.
The other thing is the select board could appoint some people from that list to any vacancy on the budget committee.
if a
The other
vacancy
thing you
arises.
If a
could do is
vacancy
if you
occurred.
had 3 alternates, those could be the 3 that replace the 3 that are getting off
The next year.
the next year.
Yeah.
So you're always going to have history and knowledge and.
Feed that on the planning board, actually. Planning board has sort of fed itself through alternates. Okay.
I think if you have a smaller number, I mean, people, I believe, get on the committees because they want to have an impact. And you've got to say to yourself, if I'm on a committee that's got 30 people on it, will I even have a chance to say anything tomorrow night? But if there's only 9,
Yeah.
then you got a chance to kind of get in and have a conversation.
Yeah, I think 9 or 11 is
So the Budget
by
Committee
far.
is kind of the most popular, it sounds like.
No, it's
I'm
just,
kind
it's
of
just,
trying
the-
to
it's
learn.
just the biggest.
It's the biggest,
20,
21 to
22?
26.
Yeah.
But is that
mid-20s.
because, I mean, other commissions and committees have trouble getting volunteers? People just love to be there to decide how the money's spent?
Not necessarily. We've
Yeah.
had to serve on budget nominating committee, sometimes just a ad hoc nominating committee, and it's been like pulling teeth.
I mean, think about how many town meetings we go to when we say, okay, we're supposed to elect 21 members, we've got 9, and somebody will say, oh, Bob Smith, Susie Jones. These names just come out. usually of people who aren't there.
I'm guilty of that.
John French is infamous for picking people at town meeting to go on the budget committee.
Yeah. Well, I've been there, and for the Budget Nominating Committee as well. I mean, the other side of it is, who gets to appoint those on the Budget Nominating Committee? Is it the town meeting? Is it the select board who does that?
We're going to eliminate, our proposal is to eliminate it.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Roberta appointed me.
So-
She came in, I was in another meeting. She says, "You're on the budget nominating meeting." Thank
Yeah.
you. Left, that was it.
Next. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Archaic language, G on that same page, who appoints the tax collector, treasurer, and town clerk? I mean, this is really archaic language.
This is strange, and I don't understand why the town, the legislative body, could vote 60 days ahead of the regular annual meeting to change how these people are appointed.
Well, I think it
don't
goes back to
understand what
the
that comes
day
from.
when some of these folks were
The
actually
section is
part-time.
nuts.
And, see town clerks operate out of their homes in the smaller towns. And so there's something in here later on that says where they hold their offices too, and whether the town provides for that office space and such. But that's the historic basis that I know. It's just, as towns have grown population-wise and sophistication, those employees are appointed, and end of story.
So you think that that's something, because it's, I mean, I don't know how long it's been in there, is outdated and we could consider
Yeah.
eliminating, since the town manager.
She
and then
appoints, right.
She appoints and the select board confirms those positions. And that's handled actually in the town manager section, I think in the select board section. So we could 86,
Right.
gee,
Yeah, I think so.
good suggestion. We like streamlining and updating.
Yeah, and, I mean, throughout, the gender language is not inclusive, so it has to be gender neutral.
Right, yeah, that's, our serious copy editor over here, Nancy's,
What else did I have a note on? Well, section 10, the top of page 8, talks about when a select board member forfeits their office. And to me,
that's Article 2.
section 10, Article
Yeah, Article
2,
2.
section 10, yeah. Part B sets forth some criteria for removing a select board member.
Oh, removing, the removal
Yeah.
one.
And there should be a hearing process, I think, included in that.
Let's see.
They want to eliminate,
But that, they're already doing a discussion on recall, right? That's being, wouldn't that go into that eventually? Remove it from there and go to like recall? Or,
yes, but the charter doesn't have a recall provision yet.
right, that's something
Right,
that's
right.
We're
being,
working on that.
Okay,
We have it on our list to discuss. The state legislation, 30A, has a recall procedure for
Right.
town offices,
Yep.
which we could theoretically adopt. But you're saying on the forfeiture section,
yeah, this is really a
It would-
select board action rather than a
Yes, it is.
citizen's action. If somebody moves to Florida, doesn't resign, doesn't say anything, they're not here. I mean, other towns have run into that.
so you suggest a hearing?
Hearing.
Would it be an open meeting or
I would think,
Public hearing? A public hearing?
public hearing.
but it's part of, to be a select board member, you have to live in the community. If you're not resigning here, you no longer can be.
So, but that's when this would come into play, I think.
if they don't
If
tell
they don't do
anybody,
anything
they're just
at
not
that point.
showing up?
Not say
Yeah.
where.
Or what if you just go there for 5 months a year for vacation? Say, I'll see you when I
Right,
get
right,
back.
yeah.
And one of the things we're thinking about too, Roger, is to include this forfeiture of office, filling the vacancy language to all the boards. Because the planning board had an issue, gee whiz, 6 or
Yes.
7 years ago. We were down to 3 people. We
Yeah.
had one person who was very ill, couldn't attend, and we weren't allowed to replace him.
I remember that.
And it was just, I mean, I think nobody had ever thought of that possibility, when they wrote the rules. So
Yeah.
those things do happen. We
Well,
should have language so that it gets addressed automatically.
Well, at least for the planning board and the ZBA.
Yeah.
I mean, if it were and maybe the budget committee, but if it were like the Conservation Commission or Pathways, I mean, those kind of manage their,
Well, that's why we're
Affairs,
talking
yeah.
about the boards.
Yeah.
Not the committees.
that's the distinction you make, yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the boards make decisions, the committees make recommendations
Yeah,
for
okay.
the large part.
Yep, all right.
But the commission is called out someplace, I remember, from back years ago, that the commission, the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board are required for the town.
I don't think the commission
Unlike
is
committees.
required. It says a municipality may appoint or may form a conservation commission. It doesn't say shall. I looked at the state statute today.
It's not a state statute.
Well, the state
It's a-
statute says
It's a
that-
town.
Oh,
It's somewhere in the
It
town
would be in-
information. I'd have to go back
On the
to.
town.
it would have to be in the charter if it's a
2008.
requirement.
And to try to find it.
I always assumed it was a state thing. That's what I.
It says the town, a municipality may, and then it gives provisions on how they're appointed or elected and what their duties are, but it says may.
Yeah, but in terms of this context.
Yes.
You may have to say boards and commissions.
Good point.
Or just boards.
Or committees,
and not
boards, committees, and
Committees and
commissions.
commissions are more equal. I'm not sure how the terminology flows.
While you're here, let me ask you about that. It talks about or is convicted of a crime or of offense which is reasonably related to their ability to serve as a board member
It's a moral
while,
thing,
while in office.
A moral thing used to always be there that, what do you call it? That you could be removed for.
Yeah.
I think it says, which is reasonably related to their ability to serve as a board member, which means somebody could be convicted of a crime or an offense that may not, I mean, they might not be sentenced to jail, so they could still be a select board member if they weren't in jail. Because it says, which is reasonably related to their ability to serve as a board member. In other words, you might be convicted of a crime and be on probation, and so you would still be able to serve as select board member.
Possibility, yeah.
Have you talked about a code of ethics for the board?
Oh, interesting. thought.
That's, county commissioners have that. I mean, and the question is, what standing does that have? You can have a code that's like advisory,
Oh,
and then, but, how far do you go to require someone to be in compliance? And because some of the things in the code are, as you say, they're moral, ethical things and not legal things.
So they're subjective.
And they're
Right, it's
probably.
subjective.
Suggestions, they provide a guidance,
Right.
but-
I think that's,
If we think about the current situation going on in DC, what is a high crime and misdemeanor? It's a very squishy definition, and I think that that's what we would want to avoid.
Yep.
The big thing I would always worry about is with any kind of recall or anything like that you wouldn't be able to recall a board member because you didn't like his vote. That's the big thing, or their
Yes.
vote.
Yep.
I mean, one thing to be a convict or doing something like that, or not
Yep.
showing up, or I understand that, but just because you don't agree how they voted, you shouldn't be able to remove them. And that seems to be the
Yeah.
push in some places.
Well, when I worked for the city of Bangor, there were some instances in city council, one where a woman was getting ready to retire, and she actually moved to Florida, but she'd never resigned from the city council. And they had no authority to do anything about that. So when her term ended, which was only fortunately like 6 months away, she was no longer on the term. But there was, a bunch of discussion about, well, how do you handle something like that? And there's an example I can think of here, I won't name names, but a individual who moved to Union from Camden was still registered voter.
I remember that.
I remember that. I remember that.
Yes. And so, I mean, so if you had a select board member, for example, who moved to another town and yet
Wasn't a
took their source of authority, the election, and not the law that said you have to be a resident of the town, then that again is like troublesome.
And that was the whole discussion, what was a resident? Remember that went
Yeah.
round and round for a long time.
We brought that up last meeting, right?
We do say in this section that you forfeit office if you fail to qualify, you don't meet the qualifications, and one of the qualifications is that you're a resident again.
Right, okay, well, yeah.
But-
But still, the hearing process, I think, would
No, I think that's interesting.
add to that.
But the forfeiture part for a crime, that's C. That's like gonna be fodder for lawsuits.
Well, not if it's, I don't know.
Because it's completely subjective, is convicted of a crime or offense which reasonably relates to
Yeah.
the one's ability.
If you want to
Just-
eliminate that, then you say, or is convicted of a crime or of offense while in office, period.
Yep, could do that.
But running a stop sign's a crime.
Or an offense, yeah.
Right, that's what I'm
Say like a misdemeanor.
Well,
or
that's
something
why I'm
like
saying,
that.
we get into this high crimes and misdemeanor thing again.
Right, so that gets into,
Is clearly you don't want people that are going to embezzle or pay off their friends to get contract, all that kind of, you don't want that to happen. But people make mistakes.
Yep, sure.
so wouldn't it be more likely that that would be part of a recall provision? That would be something, there would be these various examples of why there might be, people might petition to recall somebody who's on a committee or a commission or a board.
I think what you have to be careful of is you want specifics so people don't say, well, the way I interpret this word is as follows, but not so specific that a lawyer's going to come back and say, oh, well, you didn't
list
say
X.
robbing a convenience store, you only said robbing a bank, so therefore it's okay to stay. I mean, sometimes the more specific you make it, the more trouble you get into, because you've excluded all these other things that might be similar in
But there
fashion.
are levels of crimes that you could just write in that way. I mean, Randy would probably know, like, that a misdemeanor is this versus armed robbery or
A felon.
a felon or things like that. So you could do something like that
Yeah.
versus trying to spell out every situation.
The whole
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
statute of the state of what's a crime or not.
And I still think the recall is citizen-initiated, whereas this would be board-initiated,
Right.
so.
I think that's one of the things that helps this problem is that if you added after a hearing by the select board, then the discussion would happen with the select board about whether the crime is reasonably related to the ability to serve.
Right.
And I think common sense might prevail in that case.
Well, I'm thinking like domestic abuse these days. I mean, that would be unconscionable for a public official in a sense, and many employees have been, fired over that. But does that limit someone's ability to serve?
Right, and also
The
it
mind
might
is still
be a
functioning.
misdemeanor
I don't know.
legally. Might be treated as a misdemeanor legally.
Yeah.
People plead down.
Yeah, with a period of time between the accusation and when it's actually resolved could be
Yes.
lengthy.
It can be, sure.
So would that be a good thing to see how other towns handle it?
Yep, and probably get an attorney's advice too.
Could we ask MMA maybe?
They will send you to the state library archives and send you, but I could try. Some towns have forfeiture as a result of missing a certain number of consecutive meetings and stuff.
Right.
Does the county commission have a forfeiture thing, do you remember?
Not that I remember.
So looking at forfeiture a little bit more is a good idea.
And just, if we're looking at forfeiture and residency requirements, one idea that I thought we should have is, I think that if you're a member of the planning board, you should be a resident of the town. That's not a requirement.
Oh,
It's not currently a requirement. I don't know why, but that's the way it is.
yep,
I'm thinking if we want to have, I think you can make a reasonable argument that because they make decisions, the select board, planning board, ZBA, or have they're a little slightly different level than
Yep.
other committees. Is it better to address forfeiture, recall, residency, all this kind of stuff? Is it better to address that in one section or in a section for each one of those organizations?
We don't have a planning board section, or we don't have a ZBA section in the charter. If we added sections for them, we could put it once in select board and reference it back, so you don't have to copy the language
Yeah.
3 times.
Yeah.
If we decide to add a section about planning
Elected and
board, and
appointed boards, right?
yeah, it could just say, and it could be in the general provisions, elected and appointed boards, there is something about it, and that's where it could
Yeah.
be.
And that way, if 5 years from now, the state tells us we now need to have a board of whatever, you know, a new group, then we're already covered. We don't have to write in new language to.
And what did you call it? You said elected officials?
Elected and appointed boards, because the select board is elected, budget committee is elected, and the planning board and the ZBA is appointed.
Elected and appointed boards, okay.
Well,
So
but
that
if
would
you're
be
going
a
to include the
separate
budget
section,
committee,
right?
then you're going to
Yeah,
have
I
to say.
think that would go probably in general
board.
provisions where we
They're not
talk
board, they're
about
committee.
certain
Right.
things that apply to
Right.
everything.
But also, we've already talked about earlier that we may talk about the budget committee, and as it may end up being an elected committee, who knows?
Well-
A board.
Well, it actually is
But
elected
you
already.
but here's, you said elected and appointed boards and committees. Well, that includes Parks and Rec.
Well, I
That
don't want to get
include-
into
well,
that.
That's what I'm
board-
saying, is we
those
need
are
to,
select board
we need to
committees.
figure out what the language
Boards and
is.
commissions.
So that-
In general provisions, we have a section 2, elected or appointed officers' terms, so you could have elected or appointed officers' qualifications and forfeiture or something. It could be added right to general provisions where we talk about also personal financial interest is in there, which applies to all of these people. So it could go in general provisions.
Okay.
And it says elected and appointed
It says elected or
officers?
appointed officers, this is terms, this is just
Officers or
officers.
But wouldn't it
elect-
make sense just to have a general
Yeah,
That's it.
provision with, really, everything?
That's-
So you would have,
but you
In
wouldn't
Article 8, general provisions.
right.
and you
it
wouldn't
just-
call an office, a committee member an officer.
I'm not sure we need to talk about committee members.
You see what I
We don't
mean?
need to talk about design team,
I mean, I'm saying I
CDAC.
don't think officers
The
should be the
committees are the
word.
board,
Well, for
long-term
terms,
boards, and
no.
they.
Terms is
manage
different.
those. The select board manages all the committees, they
Right.
assign them, and if they're not doing their thing, they can remove them.
yeah,
Right.
So-
elected and appointed boards.
Right.
I like that term. I
And
think
then
that
that's where
handles it.
also, if we decided to have a code of ethics, it could be in that section as well.
Yeah, more typically it's in an appendix, but.
A definition of resident, all
We
of
have
those
that.
things would be
We have that already.
in that section.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, we have that up in the definitions, I believe. In the glossary, we have definitions. Okay. Roger, while you're on that section, we're suggesting a new language for filling of vacancies. Under vacancies, forfeiture of office, filling of vacancies,
Did you skip C?
and record of
Did we already
attendance.
talk about that?
Ooh, okay, we could go to record of
I
attendance.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
but I
no,
didn't-
no, 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 we haven't talked about it amongst ourselves. We could ask Roger what he feels about record of attendance and whether that ought to be any, or the lack of attendance being any qualification for forfeiture of office.
I don't know about a record of attendance. I think the minutes of your meetings would serve. To me, this kind of speaks well as like an attendance record that's kept separately, to save that administrative time. Make it a part of the minutes, and then if you sense someone's missing a lot of meetings, it's not that much work to go back and look at their attendance record.
I remember in the
So we
town
could just-
report, though, when I first became board member, it had board attendances.
It says it in-
Yes, yeah,
In the report.
yep, that's right.
But isn't the purpose of this to get everybody to attend? So
Yes.
shouldn't we
Yes.
have curative language in here rather than just saying we're going to publish a list of who didn't show up?
Yeah, I think so.
Because this is
That
just,
doesn't accomplish anything.
Yeah, but you can't hold it against somebody because if they take off for February to go for a vacation with their family, you know, and they miss 2 meetings in a row, you know.
That's why it has to
Yeah,
be,
so it's gotta be-
and usually the language says unexcused absences, sorry, I've got the flu, I can't come. That's a reason, you know?
Yeah,
yeah, some people say a forfeiture if you miss 3 consecutive meetings without it's sort of an excused absence, or 25% within 6 months. That's Kennebunk's, but,
You know, if people are going to be on the select board, and they're expected to be on vacation for 2 months out of the year, that doesn't match up very well, I don't think. I think they should think
Because
about
that's
that
8
before they
meetings.
make that. Yeah.
Yeah,
or
but
one,
the present board has a habit of meeting a lot during the day. Those sometimes may not be attend, I wouldn't be able to
in the
attend.
workshops,
In their workshops. I wouldn't be able to attend their,
but that's not a regular meeting.
no, I know, but it is
So that
still-
wouldn't count.
Well, true.
I don't think, I mean, I wouldn't count that as missing an essential meeting, because a workshop, you're not voting on making decisions about
They're
things.
using the workshop to do a lot of work that they would normally
Correct.
do at the public meeting because of time.
But
And,
I
you know,
think
they
the-
could
I think the
concentrate on one.
boards make those adjustments depending on who's on the board. If they've got a 5-member board and one person says, hey, I can get off work until 5 o'clock, and that's it, then they're not going to meet during the day. I think
That's-
they're going to be,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what's
they're going to be respectful of that person and say, okay, can you meet at 5:30 or whatever, and do it that way.
That's one of the reasons on the select board's list that I handed out today. It says, look at the current requirement for 3 select board votes, especially if only 3 are in attendance. So they want to be able to vote on something when there's only 3 people there. Because now it has to be all 3 people have to vote for it. And I think it's because it's tied to an attendance problem.
Not necessarily, because I've seen votes held up because there was 2 members missing,
Right.
and it's a topic that really need to be discussed by the whole board, and voted on by the whole board. So, I mean, there are situations where you need to
Be
stop
flexible.
and be flexible, yes. But there are also regular, what do you call it, housekeeping stuff that needs to be taken care of, and you can't because you don't have enough people.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, so the thought about attendance requirements and whether that's a qualification for forfeiture, we need to be thinking about. Okay, filling of vacancies. I just want to tell you, we've come up with new language for that. And it says, if a seat on the select board becomes vacant more than 6 months prior to the next regular town meeting, the select board shall call a special election to fill the unexpired term within 60 days from the date the vacancy occurred. If the vacancy occurs less than 6 months prior to the next regular town meeting, the select board may call a special election. It's a little more specific than what we've got.
That sounds good.
All right, you're next.
Well, on the next page, section 13, general and administrative ordinances. I'm not sure where to go with this, except to say that I was always confused by this. What goes before the citizens for vote to approve an ordinance, and what does the select board have for authority? And I used to go to Terry Calderwood and say, which is this, Terry? And he'd come back with a decision, but I never knew how he developed it. And I'm sure it was based in law, but this seems to give broad authority to the select board to serve as, for general administrative ordinances. But what are general and administrative ordinances? Is it like these something that would be in these
Police
first?
ordinance would be a general ordinance, as opposed to land use ordinance, which is not general and it's not administrative.
Okay, well, what about the feeding seagulls ordinance?
Is that in the police ordinance?
No. No, that's.
Well, I don't know what it is. I
It's
mean,
just,
it was
it's in the
certainly was, I mean, it's the one I can think of. It was certainly controversial, but, I mean, how do you gauge the weight of that in terms of the whole authority that towns have? Feeding seagulls, for the most part, that's pretty minor stuff.
But most of these ordinances that, like, especially the police, the board they could do it for a year, I believe.
Yes,
And then-
emergency, yeah.
And then after that 1 year, it either has to be a vote of the
Yeah.
people or it goes away.
Yeah.
Actually, doesn't this say enact as opposed to approve? In other words, to me, doesn't enact mean that they're responsible for making sure it happens, as opposed to voting 3 to 2 to change the ordinance.
But why,
I mean,
why would they have to have authority to enact? To me, that's,
That's their responsibility.
Their responsibility anyway.
The board,
it must be in state statute somewhere. If there's an ordinance
well, actually,
adopted by your legislative body, then you have to enact it.
it does have the old reference, and I found the new reference, but I didn't write down what it means. It's in 30A, Chapter 141, I think.
Well,
so-
under the broader scope of things, later on, I'll have some suggestions about what the authority of the select board is, or maybe could be, to adopt ordinances.
Okay. So that's a question mark.
Yeah, but then you're getting close to a council,
Right. Yeah.
you know.
And then it says, the last sentence there, the select board shall have responsibility for the annual report, preparation, delivery.
We've 86
Put that with the town manager's
We did,
staff.
when we talked about Audra's list, that was one of the things that Audra also brought up, because she really is responsible for it. So you guys are on the same page, we're 86ing that.
And then, next page, section 18, you probably talked about this already, codification of ordinances. And it talks about, they shall be kept in loose leaf form. I think I agree that, paper is certainly the most long-lived form for archival materials. But how practical is that in some senses these days? Electronic is a lot easier to distribute, easier to prepare. Well, I guess you still have to have the paper record. Anyway, I don't know if you want to give some thought to that, but
Should we say something about?
I don't know about loose leaf, that kind of thing.
I wonder, would it be more important to say that there also has to be off-site storage?
Yes?
I mean, that's more typical in today's world.
Yes, it would be.
When you're
Yep.
having compliance issues, because if the building burned down, we would want to know that somewhere else in a bank vault at Camden National, or wherever, we've got copies of the important documents. Somewhere.
Or in the cloud, I don't know if that suffices these days.
Yeah, but someplace off-site, so if there was a catastrophe right here,
Yep.
all that stuff still exists.
Yeah.
So it would be paper form somewhere.
It's usually, I mean, for what we have to do, we have paper and digital on-site. We've got digital off-site and paper off-site of certain required things. And off-site means not next door, it's off-site. You know, it's.
If we had another Camden fire, it wouldn't
Right.
be impacted.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good combination, paper for
And,
maybe the original source, but then duplicates at off-site
yeah,
storage, yeah.
good suggestion.
And so that protects the town too, if somebody tries to get into the website and.
If they hack it.
And hack it and get
Change it all.
money,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, you mean ransomware?
Yeah, ransom money.
Yeah.
It's happened in Maine.
In Rockport.
Yes, it did.
They're doing that anyway, just backing up computers with isolated drives. They do that routinely.
What's that?
They back up the computers with a drive that they can disconnect,
Or-
They're supposed
yeah.
to back it up every day.
but with a drive that gets disconnected.
I don't know about that.
Right. But I mean, that's why we have paper ballots. We already have paper ballots in Maine, but that's why US voting system needs to convert back to paper.
That might not happen in our
The
lifetime.
only problem is paper storage and moisture problems and all the rest of the stuff that goes on with.
And running out of
Yeah.
shelf space.
That too.
Okay.
What, did you have any suggestions about the petition, section 15 petitions for articles on the warrant,
Didn't really look at that, no.
What page you on now?
page 9?
9. In terms of percentage of voters or something, you mean, or,
Yeah,
yeah. No.
and whether, I mean, there's nothing wrong with voters getting up a petition, but then, at that point, the MMA's position years ago was that then, with a duly authorized petition with the correct number of signatures, that then select board should automatically put that on the ballot. But our select board didn't do that.
Because at that time, there was competing
Yes.
petitions,
So there was a
and the lawyers
decision.
felt that you could end up with two votes, and one could cancel the other, if I remember the
No.
time.
Yeah,
I
I don't
came up with
remember
a
that.
suggestion to be in the town meeting section that would, and it's language, I think it comes from the state, but it comes from another town. It says petition by voters if select board refuse. If the selectmen unreasonably refuse to call a town meeting, a notary public may call the meeting on a written petition of a number of voters equal to the last 10% of the number of votes cast in the town at the last gubernatorial election, but in no case less than 10.
If I recall, the language was that you had to do it within 45 days of receipt of the petition being authorized by the town clerk at a special town meeting, unless you were near the regular town meeting. But there was a couple legal things at that time. I do recall what you're talking
At this
about.
time, these were going on the secret ballot, not at a town meeting. They were on the secret ballot.
Correct.
And, yeah, and so, I mean, that's subjective now. And Camden isn't the only community that refused to put things on the ballot. Citizens petition, they did it in Kennebunk a few years ago, and, you know, I read the papers, so I see it, because it interests me.
But this isn't, it says the select board shall.
I know.
But what we are adding, if you remember, we had this conversation a couple of meetings ago, we were going to add the Herman language that includes a review by the town attorney to make sure it isn't in conflict with other parts of the charter or in conflict and the language is logical. Remember, we decided we were going to add that language here?
But that
Which-
also happened with these, that the town attorney looked at them before they went out to petition signature. That's always a smart thing to
To
do.
do it first.
That you do it first, but even so, the select board made a decision.
But
That's
they,
it's just to not
but this
have
says
it
they
in there.
can't. It says they shall. And if they refuse, if we put language in here, if they refuse,
The language is already in there. It says that
The
you
citizens
have-
can do.
that
have
the
the vote to
citizens,
call it forward.
that's under initiative and referendum
Right.
over there in general provisions.
Right.
Yes.
Probably should all be in one place.
Right, but the language is always there, it's just.
It should be in one section.
That's why the lawyer eventually persuaded the select board to put it on the ballot, because it does
But
say
as
that.
far as the language, it says you need, what is it, percentage of the last gubernatorial, that seems to have worked in most communities. That seems to be a pretty standard language. that
Yes,
works
I've
there.
seen that in lots of
Right.
charters. Okay.
Then, of course, the town manager's authority and duties should be more consolidated than it is. You know, for example, E is appoint the treasurer, tax collector, or town clerk, and it should say, and all department heads. Or name them out if you want.
I think all
Confirmation by
department
select
heads,
board.
because if we start changing the names, if we start changing the names of departments or add a department, then the charter's all of a sudden out of date.
Yep. And, of course, in H is reference to the school department, and that can come out.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to make notes.
I'm sorry, Roger, you're H on page 11? Is
Mm-hmm.
that where you are?
Get rid of the, except the school department.
Yeah, you don't even need to say the school department, I don't think.
Oh. Yeah,
And I'm not sure
E6.
wastewater, I think generally conforms to the town's purchasing policy. So I don't know that there's an exception for that.
Wastewater is wastewater 8,
But this is,
wastewater.
oh,
Act as a purchasing agent for, I think it's 5, isn't it?
Well, she would be the purchasing agent. The town manager would be the purchasing agent for all departments, period.
because she's the chief executive of the wastewater.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
The select board has to approve a bid.
Yep.
But still, it's up to the manager to administrate it, so to
Right.
speak.
Now that we share at least one department head with Rockport, should we talk in here about how only the purchasing manager for the portion of that department head's budget that applies to Camden? Do we need to be specific on that?
No, because I think the budget spells that out. They're only in control of that Camden's share of the budget,
Yeah.
right?
Right, and you've got a contract that deals with that, and I think that would cover it. I mean, you appoint a single assessor,
Correct.
and I think that's,
Well, we really
Really?
don't have an assessor's agent, right? Because the assessors,
No, we don't have assessors. We
I
used to
thought the
be,
assessor
We
was
used to be the
the select.
assessors.
not anymore.
yeah, not
No,
anymore.
we voted on that.
Assessor's
About 3
agent.
years ago?
There's no agent
Remember, because you
anymore.
moderated that meeting when we voted on it.
Assessor,
Okay.
Right.
yeah, single assessor.
The board was the assessor, and he was the assessor's agent before.
We just, now our charter, we changed it. It just didn't show up in your charter, the change.
And I don't, well, if I may, I hate to do
Orient.
this, but to muddy the waters a little bit. You know, I was all in favor of doing this assessor's agent because of you know, professional and all the education and all that you needed. And we were just regular people, we're not, I mean, Martin was
Right.
on at that time, he was a real estate broker, he understood it all. But in all fairness, after we did that, and then we went through that reval, and people were coming to the board, and the board had no position really to help them.
Right.
Like
We had no Board of Appeals anymore.
Right, the Board of Appeals went to the county Board of Appeals. Yeah.
Yeah, you could pull that back if you wanted to, but
Well,
it's a pretty good board, it has been anyway.
it is, and it's a very professional board, and that's the thing that's worked well. It's just that there's no town, you know, I don't know what the word is I want to use, but it's just, you know, being able to help somebody, you know, and if, even though you're not going to change anything, but maybe help them through the process, or make sure that they had an understanding, you know, I mean, they do a great job over there, do their best to make sure the citizens well informed, but sometimes they want to hear it from their
Yeah,
elected officials,
they do,
you know.
yeah. I
So do you think, is that a policy, or is that something that ought to
Some
be
kind
in
of
the
review
charter?
process allowed in there, and maybe not a review of any
Yes.
vote to say, because it's still, I think the county is the best way to go for when they do the
Yeah. Appeal, assessment.
Yeah, appeal. But there should be some kind of a, I don't know, review process within the community. I don't know how you'd word it to it, but it would just maybe make people feel that the town cares about them when they're handing them the tax bill.
So there's somebody in town to go to, I mean, I guess they would go and see Carrie or somebody, and then he would say, well, you go to the county. And end of story, there wouldn't be,
Well, you've
here's the
got-
process that you have to go to
I'd
if you
hope
have
that
an appeal.
Town sends you a bill, you
Right.
go to the town's tax assessor, you argue point for whatever reason you think it should be less or more, whatever.
Right.
If that doesn't work, then you have to appeal to the county commission board,
Right.
and if that doesn't work, you have the right to go to Superior Court, I believe. And that's your, you know, unless it's
Process.
$1 million commercial property, then it goes to the state,
Yeah.
right? It bypasses the rest.
Well, it seems to me maybe a matter of the assessor just maybe in the job description or something, meeting with people who have concerns or questions and just adding more of a human face to it.
That's sort of the problem we had when
Well,
the.
Jim, I forgot to mention, you were another one of the educated, I didn't mean to not say that.
Johnny, I didn't worry about that. Yeah, thank you. When the police dispatch left, there was that concern on a lot of people's parts when it went to a general
Yes,
police dispatch.
right.
Nobody there to talk to.
Well, that would be interesting. I mean, this is something we could suggest, looking at the job description. I mean, I don't know if the job description has anything like that in that, or ask Audra. I could ask Audra what the job
It
description
could get
says.
hard to do that, you know, because you're, you know, but I've had people still come up and see me, they got their tax bills that, and they got 20-25% increase in their assessments on Pearl and Oak through that area.
Yeah.
You know, and they didn't understand why, you know, and I just explained to them what
Yes.
the process was.
Yeah.
And they felt better about it, they didn't like the, you know, the answer, but
Right.
somebody explained it to them.
Yeah.
I don't know how we handle that. Maybe we just need to keep thinking about how to have some local help before you end up
Maybe it's
going to the
something that
county.
Maybe the board itself might want to say, the select board, and say, okay, we're going through a reval, maybe that they need to look at this, say, okay, maybe 3 of us or 2 of us or whatever could get together, and if folks have a question or they want to come talk to the board, and that, you know, they could help them through that. I mean, I don't want to change the process, so to
Right.
speak, because I think it's very good.
Yeah.
And it's professional people that are
Yes.
doing it. So, but I would like to, like you said, put the human side to it. And I'm not saying that these people aren't human, but they're
Right,
not.
well, it's somebody local and somebody they know,
Right.
as opposed to going to a
Sure.
group that, who are these people?
Mm-hmm.
Phew, okay.
It's just something
Adding to
for-
the, you're adding to the
Yeah.
list, John.
I know, but it just, I felt really, you know, out of place, so to speak, when trying to help some people, because you had no say in it. You don't even have any say in the overlay. The board doesn't. It's all set by the tax assessor. And that's a big part of the tax bill, how much overlay is gonna be. And I really think that needs to come back to the board, the overlay.
I never really looked at that.
Well,
But
I mean, like, at times, I remember we had $300,000-$400,000 overlay because of, we went through that big reval in '04.
Right.
And so we had to account for any adjustments we would have to make, and we didn't use but $150,000 of it, so the rest of it went into, roll into a designated surplus. But that is a big rate, that's a $300,000 increase.
I don't
It's a
understand
big
what you
rate.
mean by overlay.
What it is it's, what's the word, they anticipate, costs outside of the budget, isn't it? That's,
Well,
You don't mean
no,
anticipated borrowing.
Overlay really is to adjust for an anticipated, like,
tax rebate.
tax rebate, like the big one in Rockport, you know, where that, on Glen Cove, where the 25 lots,
Subdivision change.
where like 6 million, and it went back to $1 million or something. So that, it adjusts for that. So, but the assessor can normally look ahead and see, is there a potential appeal here of an assessment value and make that adjustment? But the overlay goes into your surplus if it's not used, so it's a way of building up surplus. But I can't say the county, the commissioners vote separately on the surplus, overlay, I should say.
Well, yeah,
It's
but
a-
right now, the overlay is part of the tax.
Yeah.
You know, it's not
Right.
select
But-
board decision like it used to be.
Right.
How much overlay you want to have.
Yep.
You know, sometimes it's as little as $20,000 or $30,000, and then sometimes it could be 100,000 plus. So it's quite a hit on the tax rate.
Well, does the town have a policy that says how much surplus should be kind of kept,
There's a select board policy, which has
Select
been
board.
in since you were minister.
right, 2 months operating
Yeah, it's
expense?
a
Should-
little more than 2 months.
Surplus should equal about 2 months operating expense.
Right now, we're close to $4 million.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the dollars would be, but that's a pretty good policy. Some towns say a month. But if the overlay brings that 2-month standard, exceeds it, then that's something that ought to be looked at, I would say.
Well, you never know, though, what the overlay is gonna be, because you're trying to anticipate how many people are gonna come in for adjustments or appeals on their
In the
tax
other
bill.
direction. So you get a windfall, but you have to consider how many people are going to come in.
Right. So
It's
if
in
you say, I have
anticipation
a
of that.
$100,000 house and I thought it was worth 50, and I win my appeal, so I get, my tax bill now has gone back to 50,000 instead of 100,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I following me?
I need somebody
I'm trying not
else,
to.
I need somebody else to sit down and talk about that. This just,
I'm just throwing it out.
it's not registering with me.
Okay.
I'll have to say that.
Sorry if I.
No. I understand kind of what you're talking about, but I don't get how to handle it or really how to
I
describe
don't
what
think
the
it's a
issue
charter
is.
item. I think it's more
Policy
administrative
item.
policy for the board and the town manager. and
But I'm
the-
just saying that these are some of the charter changes that I've seen that really, I really miss being able to help. And then,
Right.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so I would say for the town manager, without being too specific, a lot of the budget preparation stuff needs to come out of the financial page and be put under the town manager's responsibility. Preparing the budget, you know, all the timeline stuff.
Because that's in financial, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, it's in Article 6.
Could we do a simple line that says, referring to financial procedures for budget?
It really kind of should be in both places.
Yeah, we should say the town manager is responsible for having a budget ready at such and such a date, right?
Well, it says that in Article
It's
6.
in the financial section.
Talks
Under
about
there, under the
how you
managers.
put the budget together, and you have to have numbers, and you have to have
Yeah.
explanation.
Yeah, you
about
could do
what
that.
the task is, and those kind of things.
The
You
length
don't
of
need that detail, but you could have a simple reference that
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
responsible for
that's
the
what I'm saying. I think
preparation
we
of the
just-
budget and see the financial
We just
procedures.
put a reference in to go to page whatever, and here it is.
So right now, what policy has been, unless it's changed, says department heads and everything had to have everything in December to go to
Right.
We're not
January.
talking about changing the process.
No, I know, but
It's
I'm
a
just
question of
saying.
where do you show the information in the
Correct.
in the
Right,
charter?
yeah.
So we don't have,
I'll be
so we
quiet.
say it all once and nothing twice.
Because
as
you
best-
don't
as
want to
best
have to
we can.
try to remember to change the language in two different places.
Oh,
But it
Yeah.
is the responsibility of the manager.
it is, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And,
Well-
and the financial section talks about that.
Okay.
But that's why we should have
So we
this
could say,
reference to
as
say, go
described
see-
in. As
XYZ.
described in financial procedures.
And did you talk with Audra about a 5-year capital improvement program?
She didn't bring it up, but I actually just sent, Jim and Lowry have been working on the financial procedures article. And it isn't in there, and it should be somewhere. Somebody needs the responsibility for developing the 5-year capital plan.
think it
And right
needs to-
now, it's mixed up with what the planning board does,
It
which
is.
is bizarro
Right.
in the language.
What are you talking about, the capital improvements plan? We always had a 10-year when we were board members.
We do, but it isn't in
But-
here
but
that
the
needs to be
charter says
prepared.
The planning board is supposed to come up with a 5-year capital plan. And that's kind of the only financial job of the planning board, which really doesn't make much sense.
Right.
At the same time, we're supposed to request a plan from the school district,
Right.
and which I've
Good luck with
requested,
that.
I've requested a couple of times and never got a response. That mail was bad that day or
Yeah.
whatever.
I agree that the capital, what do you want to call it, the capital improvement plan needs to be developed, and it should be in the town manager section.
Or you could put it in the budget, because it normally would come as part of the budget, because that informs
does.
how your capital side of the budget goes
She's
together.
responsible for preparing or he or she responsible for preparing the budget, then they'd be responsible for preparing the capital. If we list the capital improvement plan in the budget
But I
section.
think that's an important, fiscal aspect of municipal government is to have that plan set forth
Yeah, so
and
you could,
managed.
you could add
annually.
that language in your section 5 budget,
I used to do it.
plus the schedule of borrowing and debt service payments.
10-year, wasn't it? It was out.
Well, I don't remember. Some of that stuff we did take out longer.
Right, and
Yeah.
I remember everything was there.
Yeah.
The whole town, all the
Yeah.
buildings, all the streets and sidewalks and name it, it was there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll find that in a number of charters that you look at for other examples.
I think it's still done, it's just not, like you said, it's not in the document,
Yep.
it's a requirement.
Yep. And the last thing I would do under the town manager's responsibilities is think about adding responsibility for seeing that all safety regulations are complied with. I mean, you've got OSHA stuff, you've got stuff at the state, you've got chemicals that you have to deal with, and I found, I mean, that takes a lot of time. Or you could have the town manager appoint someone with a safety officer extra duty or something.
I'm wondering if it might be, we should have somebody that's got those responsibilities.
Yes.
I'm wondering if it might make more sense for either the fire chief or DPW, who have already been trained in that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I wonder how many town managers have been trained in how to handle hazardous materials.
But they already
Well-
have a safety committee, and the fire department's very involved in it,
Yeah, well, I'm more concerned with someone
responsible.
just tracking what reports are due on what hazards
Oh, okay.
and when,
Okay.
and then the department heads could generate the stuff, but
Okay.
I think it's the management responsibility to say,
I
but
didn't
it could
know
be
whether you
department
wanted
head,
to do
but,
that, or like actual out there doing inspections, checking on things and whatnot.
So,
right, no, not to do the actual work, but just to say, October 1st, we're due in the Public Works Department to be compliant with OSHA or whatever.
Yeah,
So there seems to be the chart, but someone needs to manage the chart. and-
okay.
Could you just say something about add a responsibility that says town managers to ensure that all safety regulations.
All state and federal
are-
safety regulations.
State and federal
Yeah.
are complied with.
Right.
Period, and it's
Period.
up to the town manager who can appoint duties to department heads who's going to do it. But
Yep.
adding it would be helpful, okay.
Would that also include civil defense kind of things?
That's the fire chief, the police chief, they're assigned that job.
Yeah, I think that's not what I'm thinking of in terms of geosafety data sheets and the licensing and inspection of vehicles and all the rest of
I'm
that.
thinking like this evacuation route stuff,
Oh.
all that
Oh,
kind
we
of
have an
thing.
emergency management person, right?
Right.
Isn't that
Fire chief.
fire chief?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Randy too.
Okay, wow. How are we doing on time?
Probably,
We'll break for breakfast. And
yeah. On the next page, the top, paragraph O. This is the interactions with the town manager and the select board. Well,
What page is that?
page 12.
Okay.
Not interfere with the operation of?
Yep.
Is that,
Yep. Not interfere with the operation of various departments of the town except through the department head and not independently direct employees, except in the opposite person in authority. This should be the town manager,
right?
not, and I would say not,
Should just be, all communication should be through the town manager.
yeah,
But this is in the town manager section, so it's there, this is the town manager's duty. Oh,
They're saying so the board can't go to the,
That's
It's
an-
already in the select.
that's in the
I know,
select
I
board
know.
section.
Select board cannot go to any employees
That's in the
individually.
select
and-
board
but
article.
spelling it out in the town manager's role doesn't hurt.
yeah, but,
Because
Let's
there are
see,
those that like to try to kind of go around that.
oh, I get it, I misread this, yeah.
Yeah, this is so the town manager can't go to
Yeah.
somebody who's driving a plow truck
Yep,
and tell them what to do.
yep, okay,
Well, actually, the
forget
town
that one
manager
then.
can go to somebody with a plow truck and
That's
say
not
that
what it
the-
says here. What it says
Well,
here,
they're
is they have
responsible,
to
the
go.
town manager's responsible for all
But-
personnel in the
I
town.
know.
What it says here is they need to go to whoever's in charge of DPW.
Yep,
They
Yeah.
need to
No.
go through department heads.
I'll retract my comments about that one, I misread it.
yeah, because it's in the select board that
And then this
section.
is the town report, right? To prepare the town report, it's right in here, as town manager's responsibility.
Right, we
So that
sort
takes
of
care of
just
that.
reworded it. Now, we took it out of the other one, and we've
Right.
reworded this a little bit. It says, instead of cause to be prepare an annual town report, which shall be distributed at least 7 days prior to the annual town meeting pursuant to blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Okay,
And so, I mean, Article 6, the next page, some of that, I had notes to
Article
to
6?
move out. I'm sorry, 4.
Okay.
Yeah, Article 4, page 13.
Yes.
So some of that could just be reorganized. I mean, I don't know if you want me to go through any detail, but you may have figured that out already.
Not really. All we've done sort of on general provisions is just look at, things that instead of it saying town treasurer, it says finance director.
Well, Section 1A, titles and appointment,
Yeah,
that would make more sense to me if it were under the Select Board section, because it talks about a list of who gets appointed by the Select Board. And is that administrative? It ought to be under elected.
that's an interesting,
You're right, it should be the select board committee somehow, right?
following officers and boards shall be appointed by the majority. I mean, it is,
I mean, I'm not saying the language is wrong, I'm just saying it's in the wrong place. It ought to be under the Select Board in Article,
yeah, that will help shorten this up. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Article 2, yeah.
So move that A to select board,
Under their duties.
right?
Yeah.
We have a reference, some sort of vague reference to it, but okay.
And
What
then
about B?
Well, again, it's, yeah, maybe that's okay in there. I mean, some of the language isn't quite right.
It needs a reference to personnel policy too.
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to, because I think this comes from a time when the police chief, fire chief were appointed by the select board.
We still are.
Well-
Fire chief and town attorney are,
They're hired, the police chief, the town manager, the police chief, the fire chief.
Well, that's,
Still-
is that
still
because of
hired-
this?
Yeah, they're still hired by the select board, including the
Yeah.
wastewater supervisor.
Yeah, okay.
But once they become employees, they fall under the town manager's
Yeah.
responsibilities because of the personnel policy.
Is there a reason to do that any longer? Should they all be department heads just like everybody else?
Well, you and I have been there before when it came time to remove somebody.
Well, that's true. And, yeah,
Yeah.
and point of fact, what we used to do is the select board and I and a couple
And then-
others will bring in an interview team, so we were all covered anyway, but,
But then there's the whole process for removal, the public hearing part of it, with in front of the boards. I mean, you're gonna get into a lot of changes if you wanna.
yep. Well, yeah, I mean, you have to appoint the town attorney, that's
Right.
absolutely clear no matter what. But to whether, how far the rest of that you want to go, it's pretty much what's done already. That is, town manager appoints department heads and gets confirmed by the select board. So should that be in the administrative section, or is that in the select board section? Or is it in the town manager's section?
well, it's in the town manager section. It says appoint a finance director, tax collector, town clerk. That's in the town manager responsibilities. And
What about the development director?
that would be a department head that she appoints with the
Right.
department heads, but it doesn't have, we have department heads listed. Let's see. Appointments, the select board shall, blah, 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 the town manager, all other necessary town officer boards, committees. Doesn't say that they appoint the fire chief under select board.
But it says right here, with the exception of the police chief, fire chief, town attorney,
The town
and the town
manager.
manager shall appoint.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because this is really saying two things. It's saying what the select board appoints, and then what she appoints and what she can remove. So we're kind of whittling away at the general provisions. Should police chief, fire chief, and town attorney,
I think they need to stay under the board
right,
review or.
but should we put it in the select board section?
But they fall under the responsibility of the town manager after they're hired. That's the thing.
But if the town manager shall appoint, subject to confirmation of the board, why
Yep,
doesn't the town manager appoint everybody subject to the confirmation of the board?
You could say that, I guess.
All department heads, rather than.
generally the-
I mean, there's no,
yeah,
I've been on the select board, but it doesn't seem to me that you gain anything by separating out fire chief and police chief.
I was wondering
Especially if
when
the
I
select
mentioned
board is
development.
already approving them.
But generally, at least in the past, when you hire a new police chief, fire chief, it's a much different review process than hiring the tax collector, because that's generally the town manager goes out, does all of her due diligence, whatever, and then it makes a recommendation to the board, this person. Usually the board is involved with citizens, like when we hired Chris, there was a.
Right.
It was a two-level board,
Right.
and we had outside fire chiefs and everything involved, and
The interview
an
process.
interview process, so that's the difference for the most part.
yeah. Well, and when this language was written, it's certainly the fire chief is part-time.
Yes, that's true.
Which, and so to me, that would have made some distinction. And it was actually, well, who knew? Atlantic Engine Company number 2, or someone else was their employer. We've got it
That was a
straightened
mess.
out,
That
but it
was-
was pretty murky back then.
Yeah, it was.
What if you eliminated that first part that says with the exception of police chief, fire chief, and town attorney? This is really saying the town manager shall appoint a department heads, town clerk, or finance director, tax collector, subject to confirmation of the board, and shall have a power to remove such appointees when necessary, blah, blah, blah. If you eliminate that first phrase, you really are saying who this town manager appoints, which is So that ought to go under town manager, and under select board duties, we say that it's the select board that hires the police chief, fire chief, and town attorney, and does the removal process. This is,
Town manager.
yeah, and town manager,
Yeah.
which we've got, and
If we're going to give select board confirmatory powers for hiring, they should also have confirmatory powers for
we're
firing.
removing.
They shouldn't be allowed, if I was a town manager, I shouldn't be allowed to hire you, subject to all these other people voting and saying that's a good idea, but then I get to fire you by myself. That's out of tilt.
That's why the police chief, fire chief, and town attorney are accepted from this
Well,
language.
But
But they, like I said earlier, they fall under the personnel policy.
the town manager has appoint department heads, blah, 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 subject to confirmation of the board, and shall have the power to remove such appointees.
Without confirmation.
Without confirmation of the board. And I'm saying you should have confirmation of the board go in both directions, not require,
No, Mike Baker.
not require confirmation of the select board just to hire, but not require confirmation of the select board to
I'm gonna be-
remove or replace.
I
mean,
bet you
that's-
that would not be favorably looked
Okay.
upon.
By who?
I'll call you when I get
Probably
home.
by a town manager who, if these department heads all report to me, and I'm responsible
maybe.
for the workings of the town, I should be able to fire them.
Well,
Discipline them and fire them.
Well, you never called me.
Well, that was
Recent
done by,
experience,
Not at night.
where the fire chief was removed by the town manager.
Sorry, didn't mean to do that.
And it became a big brouhaha.
You forgive it?
but this is accepting the fire chief. The fire chief can't be removed by the town manager.
I wouldn't, I mean,
The town manager can't fire the police chief, fire chief, or town attorney, according to this paragraph.
It doesn't address it.
It says, with the exception of the police chief, fire chief, and town attorney, the town manager shall
well, you're
appoint.
right, generally what would happen is,
And then it says, and shall have the power to remove such appointees. So the having the power to remove such appointees is everything but the police chief, fire chief, and town attorney. It's worded
Where in
badly.
here does it say who has the authority to remove the fire chief, police chief, and town attorney? Does it say that somewhere else in the document?
maybe you should talk to Bill Kelly and make sure,
I
because.
mean, this is a personnel policy thing, too.
Right.
The personnel
Yes.
policy may well
I mean, it just
address
seems-
some of
No,
that.
I
You got
agree.
just cause and all that stuff that goes in there.
Confidentiality and, how much, if an employee commits an infraction of some sort, often you have to hold that in confidence until
Sure.
an investigation done and so on. So what's the circle of confidentiality? Should it be
But if the town
one
manager-
person or like 5 or 6?
But if the town manager sees a safety issue, say, when the fire
Right.
chief, police chief, whatever happened, they do have the right to say you're suspended or and on
Yes.
leave or something until review.
That
Yeah,
may be in the
discipline, yeah.
personnel
It is in the
policies,
personnel.
which don't really kind of belong in here, but the authority to hire and fire maybe belongs here, but not the process of,
But generally with those three, because the manager
Right.
may suspend or whatever, but then they'll he or she would make a recommendation to the board to discharge or whatever the
Yeah.
word is, because of this reason.
Well, and the town attorney is different because that's a contract employee
Right.
as opposed to being
And the manager is.
hired.
Town manager is too.
Yeah.
And it spells out in the contract about dismissal,
Right,
how it
right,
works.
right.
I have a question about the snowball and the director of Parks and Rec and the director of the snowball. How does that work? Does that position fall in, under this paragraph too?
they'd be department heads.
Should be department head.
Parks and Rec.
That's all one person. Beth Ward is the department head for public works,
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec and Snowball.
Okay, but also at the snowball, is there some kind of citizen committee, nonprofit or something that also supports the snowball or not?
You mean the recreation, the
Ragged Mountain.
Ragged Mountain
I'm just
Recreation
asking.
Foundation?
Yeah.
That's not part of the charter.
But there's also the ski club that's very
There's a ski
active,
club, and that's-
many thousands.
That's outside of town
Right.
supervision.
Okay, and the Parks and Rec director doesn't have anything really to do with them except to liaison with that group, right?
I would say that would be correct.
Okay, well, then I would say, to move along, section 5 on that page talks about the town clerk, tax collector, and treasurer having offices in the municipal building. I think that's past language.
Or such place of business provided by the town for that purpose.
Right. Regular office hours shall be maintained.
Do you think that's all we need to say?
No, well, I don't think you need to say
Eliminate the
anything.
whole thing.
Yeah,
Just
'cause
eliminate it.
we don't say
Eliminate it.
that about the planning director or the code
So
officer.
just
or anybody
86,
else.
section 5.
Right. Like that, don't you?
I love,
Then section 6 talks about bonds.
yeah.
And I think they're talking about liability and dishonesty bonds.
And Audra had a request on that, and we talked to her when she came, and we came up with, let me find Article 4, general provision. We came up with language that said, the select board shall require a bond by a reputable surety company or other acceptable sureties such as the town's property and casualty insurance policy satisfactory to the board for all persons trusted with the collection, custody, or disbursements of any monies of the town, provided the town shall pay the cost for providing such bonds.
Right now, we're doing two. We're doing
So this would,
a surety plus. bond.
so if the select board were happy with it, it could all be under one.
Yeah.
So we've changed, that was, you and Audra were thinking the same thing.
Personnel administration, I don't think I had much to say there.
I have some questions about it. So go through what you may have under personnel administration.
Well, one of them related to section 4, paragraph 4. And that's on page 16, where it talks about establish a classification plan for full-time employees. I think it should say, except for those represented by a collective bargaining agreement. Because the personnel policy cannot be in place for those who are unionized.
Should,
Is that, because we got.
But isn't the
we got
personnel
this
policy is
Yeah.
all?
redraft
He hasn't
that
seen
Steve-
that.
Steve worked on.
yeah, Steve and I worked on it.
That's what it was.
Well, there's the Teamsters.
That's right. So if any hiring, firing has to go, well, firing goes through a
Yeah.
grievance and all that, right? You're right.
Who's union employees in the town?
Just the police department.
So what did you say, except all those represented by
By a
collective?
collective bargaining agreement. And then the same thing would apply to paragraph 7 below that about a compensation plan. I mean, their wages negotiated.
And that's, number 7?
Yeah.
You said section 7 or?
Paragraph
Number
7.
7, yeah.
Just right below
Okay.
4, yeah.
16.
Compensation classification, yeah. I mean, and maybe Audra might say, well, a classification plan isn't something that the collective bargaining does. Maybe you're right about that, I don't know.
But they still do the steps.
They do the steps, yeah. Well, on their own plan, not
But
on
it's
the
same-
town's.
But it's the same steps. For
program.
the 3% COLA, for the 5, 7, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
years.
Okay, yep,
So they're on the same steps.
yeah, it doesn't have to be that way,
No, it doesn't, you're right.
but
But
if
it
they are,
has-
that's good.
We're going to say, except for those employees with a collective bargaining agreement, so
Right.
in case other groups are added later, we don't have to. change the
Exactly, it
charter.
just says, except those represented by a collective bargaining agreement.
So that doesn't happen.
Yes, let's hope not.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
Go ahead, next. 'cause-
Well, on page 17, exempt position and specially classified positions. I rely on Audra on this one, but the law has changed, I think, since this was enacted.
Here was my thought, was to 86 that altogether, because I think section 5 on 17 and the rest of it on 18 really seem like policy, employee personnel manual issues, because laws change regarding classifications of positions, who's exempt and who's not. I think it's a mistake to have it in the charter.
Yep.
Because the charter is not quite written in stone, but certainly more so than the personnel manual, which can be changed by the select board after suggestions from the personnel board or select board manager. To me, even this stuff about establishing criteria for appointment, I think that's more detailed than it needs to be.
Yep.
And I think 5 ought to go into the personnel manual.
Sure.
And my other thought was on those things that we were enumerating under 4, duties of personnel board. Steve Malcheski worked on this because he spent years on it, but he kept all of those things itemized. And I was going to suggest summarizing them under D on page 17, which says preparation and presentation of personnel policies. I was going to change that to, where did it go? Recommendations.
Which one are you, 17? Page
On
17?
page 17, D, where it says
Okay, yeah.
preparation and
Yeah.
presentation. I can't find it, my fingers aren't working. My suggestion was to take all of A and move it to D and say, recommended personnel policies, rules, and regulations may include but are not limited to employee classifications, compensation and benefit plans, employment status, review process, and job descriptions. Rather than spending all that time saying each one of those specific things. Because they're making recommendations, they're not actually voting to change any of it. They make recommendations to the town manager and the select board, and then they would get voted on and put in the personnel policy manual. So it seems to me that we're over detailing this.
Plus it changes at the federal level, so.
Yeah, and so if we kept it a little broader and not go have 11 things that the personnel board,
Yeah, I think that.
I remember, though, we had a discussion, actually disagreement, about, I can't remember what the position was, but anyway, it was the board's responsibility, the select board's responsibility to bring them forward the position, a new position, but they had no say over the income of the wages. That was all decided by the personnel committee. And, how much this increase was going to be for the new responsibilities, all that, at that time. I think it's assistant fire chief, deputy fire chief.
Development director.
No, the assistant fire chief.
Yeah, there was some conversations about that, too.
Well, there was a thing about how much more to pay for the percentage for the responsibilities,
Yeah, do you need that position versus sharing those
So-
tasks among other people?
according to how this is written, it would have to go to the personnel board.
Right, well, or at least follow their policy, and they, yeah. You got, the policy seems to work, the new policy, they've gone through the whole thing.
The policy
Yeah,
manual.
and it works very well now.
So,
Steve
wouldn't
and that
general
group-
language be work okay? Because it's saying that they recommend these things?
Follow the procedures of the personnel committee and board and personnel
Can
policy.
we eliminate or
Right.
consolidate by going to the area where we've got the list of the town manager's responsibilities and say, in addition to all these other things, they're responsible for making sure that the personnel policy is current with all state, federal, local regulations and is so designed to properly handle the variety of different types of employees that we have in the town.
And eliminating the personnel board.
No, eliminating the personnel board. You know, as the town manager can appoint somebody to help her with all these safety issues and with budgets and all kinds of other stuff, if the town manager decides that they need a personnel board, then they get one. But I'm saying is to eliminate all this language in here about personnel board, can't we just say, because it would seem to me that personnel language is going to change faster and more frequently than most any other language that's currently in the charter because of the nature of our laws. And, you know, groups that need to be protected and, you know, are identified and what have you. I'm wondering if it might just be cleaner just to say that it's the town manager's responsibility to make sure that we're always current with all the
Federal and
various
state.
federal, state,
Right.
whatever other, you know,
Regulations.
statutes, regulations we have to follow. And and she shall report annually to the select board to verify that this is in fact the case, that we're in compliance with everything.
Okay, section 3 on part B on page 15 says personnel director. The town manager with consent and approval may appoint, shall serve as personnel director and as recorder to the personnel board. It shall be the duty and responsibility of the personnel director to administer the personnel department in accordance with the rules and regulations established by the personnel board and all federal and state regulations, but it should be rules and regulations established in the town's personnel policy. Should it not say?
In furtherance or in compliance.
In
You have to
compliance.
comply
of
with the state and federal
stipulations.
regs.
Yeah.
Okay, established in,
Because I think what we want to do is make sure that we're following all the rules we're supposed to follow. And we know that they're going to change frequently. The charter, I think it's kind of like the Constitution's, it's not designed to be changed twice a year.
exactly.
That shouldn't be the intent of it.
So let me ask you, some of these things in A, after you elect a chairman, establish rules and regulations pertaining to the establishment of, establish a classification, all of that stuff, you're really still saying to maintain,
No, I'm putting that that goes into policy.
even, but somebody has to establish the classifications. We have them now.
Right. But
Establish,
in the personnel policy manual,
right?
we have a listing of all the personnel board's responsibilities, how they're formed, how often they're
Is
replaced.
that in the manual?
With section,
Haven't looked
you're
at
not
it in a
talking about
while.
section 2.
I think it could go there.
I'm looking at section 4, duties of the
I
personnel
don't know if
board.
it's there now or not, Deb.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I think that for
Brevity's sake,
brevity, for ease of understanding, and that way, if somebody comes in and they say, I got a personnel issue, we can say, here you go, and hand them one binder, and it's got all the personnel stuff in it. And what the charter says is that we shall establish all these various procedures so that everything is done in accordance with the rules and regulations.
But you'd retain the personnel committee.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, not eliminate the committee.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Or board.
Other than the select board, there's very little listing of what all the various committees do inside the charter.
I-
You're not saying eliminate section 4.
No,
no.
I was going to say, because that, even though it's lengthy, it still spells out,
Yeah,
You know.
and the reason we don't have other collective bargaining units, except for in the police department, is because this handles employee issues, they're represented on the committee, and it provides a good way of managing all personnel.
I'm suggesting keeping it basically functionally the way it is. But take all this verbiage and put it in the personnel
Right.
policy.
Which
but you gotta have a
except,
place in the
except I
charter
would
thing.
say the section 1,
I
municipal
think this is
policy.
fine. I really do, because it's worked great.
Well, what my suggestion was to take that long list and put it in the section where it talks about how the personnel board can make recommendations on these such things.
Okay?
What if I sent you all a cleaned-up version of this section without all of, it makes it, anyway.
But what I'm worried about is there's always a time that somebody might say, well, you don't have the authority to do that. If it's spelled out, it says that what the personnel policies and group can do, it's going to eliminate that, because somebody's going to challenge in court if it doesn't spell out everything that you can do.
No, we would still have it in writing. It's just a question of where it's located.
And we would just summarize it.
I don't want to eliminate anything, because as you say, it works well.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that maybe there's a better place to put all of this stuff, rather than having some of it here and some of it there.
Okay.
My thought was to summarize it just by saying that they recommend personnel policies, rules, and regulations, and it may include, but is not limited to, employee classifications, compensation benefit plans, employment status review process, and job descriptions, which takes all of that stuff, and you just make sure all of that stuff is in the personnel manual.
Except Section 1, municipal policy, A, B, and C. Those are really important.
We're not saying eliminating that. We're talking just about
Right.
what's in section 4.
But I'd even think that that might be in another section and not just under personnel.
It's in the personnel manual, actually has a much more well-defined and well-written section about equal employment and non-discrimination. That's in the
sure.
policy manual.
But I mean, just on principle, these are important things. We're required to have posters about them in in our workplace, and I think that that language might go in the general policy section in front.
Not if we're talking about, if we have a section on personnel, if it relates to personnel, I think it ought to be in personnel. I think it would get lost otherwise.
Yeah, it would otherwise, I think.
One that, just to back up a little bit, I didn't realize the town manager could appoint somebody as personnel director. I always thought.
says that?
I always
The
thought it
approval
was
of
the
the
town.
select board.
Yeah, but I always thought it was the town manager is the personnel person.
So far,
And that's what it should be, I believe.
But the select board could, if the town manager comes in and says, I want to appoint Katrina personnel director, the select board can say, you're the personnel director, because it says with the approval of the select board.
To me, that is the responsibility of the town manager, to manage the problems, the disciplinary and whatever you want to say. I know it's not a good job, but to do that, but that's their role.
What happens if the
You-
employee population gets big enough that
We need a
town
personnel.
manager kind of runs out of time, to do all these other, they wear a lot of hats.
I know that, believe me, I know that, but we haven't changed our basic, we're still about 50 employees, have been since you were manager, pretty
right,
much.
yep.
Rockport uses the select board as the personnel board. Poland, Maine, the town manager is the HR director. Kennebunk has its own HR director. Damariscotta uses the select board as necessary. Bar Harbor, the town manager or appointee is the HR director. Gardner has no HR director. And Holton has town manager or appointee. That's all. I know.
We're not big enough for an HR director, though.
No.
So you're suggesting we eliminate that they can appoint one and just say the town manager shall
Shall
serve as
serve.
personnel director?
Correct.
I don't have a problem with that.
Well, the other language says that the select board can create department heads, and this would be another department head, I suppose.
Yeah, so we
You
could
could cover it
86.
that way.
Okay, where is that? Personnel director.
How late you gonna go tonight?
4 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So, Roger?
Talk fast.
Well, here's my question. Would you be willing to come back and talk to us to finish this up at the next meeting? Because we do have to do a couple of things before we go at 7:30.
Yep.
Or would you want to make a list? And I don't want to make you make a list because I think it's been very beneficial to actually discuss this in
too.
person. Would you be willing to come back to our next meeting or a follow-up meeting? And I could take some of these things that you've already done or try in my notes to make a list of those suggestions you've made and get them to you.
I think you brought up some very good things.
Oh, it's been great. This is very beneficial.
No, I didn't know if I was repeating what others had said or not.
No, there've just been a couple of overlaps. Because the planning board has decided to change their meetings in January, we are required to change our meetings in January, the first being the 2nd of January, and the next one would be 2 weeks later, the 16th. Are you in town on the 2nd?
Yep.
And would you be willing to come back to us, and we'll finish it up with you on the
You're talking about
2nd?
some of us maybe are not alive on the 2nd?
Well,
Or
They have
just
till
still,
midnight and 1 o'clock on the
Ask you if you're
first.
available.
Pardon?
We're going to hold a meeting at your place.
No, you won't.
yeah, we'll just come to your garage as long as it's heated.
It's heated,
Just-
believe me, it's heated.
Bring in a big fan or something that's inside.
You could come at 5:30. We'll start the meeting with you after we approve minutes. So the 1st and the 16th are our meetings in January, 5:30, same place. Unless 6 is going to be hard for you, we can have them come at 6.
I'll make it.
Well, you probably aren't, yeah. Hopefully, people aren't going to bring in a lot of cars on the
Well,
1st
actually,
or
I
2nd.
didn't do a couple things tonight to be here on time.
Thank you.
So,
All right, so that's wonderful.
went in early to do them. I'll be probably in around 5.
Okay. That's wonderful. So our next meetings are set, and we've covered a lot of ground. We have a lot more to cover. We have some tentative changes in other articles. I will ask Janice to go ahead and send them out, or do you want me to want to wait till we finish with Roger? Because I think if you all of a sudden what do you think about getting 4 more drafts of different
Why don't
articles?
we go through Roger's discussion first?
Yeah,
And
let's-
then,
And then,
Because
Rewrites
that'll
and
give
then-
the two of us a chance to go through your comments
okay,
and get them in there. How's that sound? That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially because you got the holidays coming up.
I
too.
should be able to ask Janice later for hard copies of stuff, or are you gonna hold off on?
tell me what you want a hard copy of. You probably want a hard copy of the proposed article. You got the financial section now.
I've got a,
Or, what?
yeah, I've got to find my notebook. I'll wait till my wife gets home, I'll find it.
Okay, so,
On the second?
Thursday the 2nd and then Thursday the 16th.
so the financial section and Article 4, as it's been drafted to date. But I think I'll wait on Article 4 because we're not finished with Roger, so we'll just send you the financial procedures.
do you have some language already on the planning board?
No.
Okay.
We haven't gotten that far.
No. We don't, because the only language in here with the planning board is mixed up with creating a 5-year capital plan, and that sounds, so we don't yet. So that would be something to bring up.
Thursday.
Because I know the state statute has things about, responsibility for growth, and yes, you may go. So do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting until January the 2nd?
Thank you, Roger. Very
Roger, this has been
glad I could be
immensely
of help.
helpful.
much. Was great.
It's all right. Okay.
It's been so
If
long
you
since
all
I
will-
worked as town manager. You never know how stuff changes, and you just don't have a clue.
I have a question for you. We are down 3 members. Would you be interested in joining the Charter Commission? We meet once or twice a month and do exactly what we're doing tonight.
Why don't you give him a chance to think about it?
Would you like to think about it? And of course, we could keep asking you to every meeting to talk about things, and that would sort of,
Yeah,
think about it. Would you,
I'll think about it.
on our request? Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Maybe turn off the mics, that'd be great. I'm gonna stop this. Roger, this has been very helpful.
Okay, good to see you all. Yes, happy holidays. See you.
Well, Jeff, there's one thing we have not discussed,